I will never stop saying and preaching about the virtue of hope, because I think it's one of the basic ingredients that all of us need as people of faith. Hope either begins in the first year of our life, or life itself does not begin. And when hope goes, I think it marks the last year of our life, even though we may still be breathing. Because when you give in to despair and there is no hope, you're not living. Also, through hope, I think we learn to begin to trust the world, and it enables us to enter into communion with other persons. So this virtue, this power of hope that is meant for all of us, how do we make it something that is really living in us? How can we make hope a conscious force or power in our lives? I think the story of Zacchaeus gives us an answer. First of all, here was a man who wanted to see. He wanted to see Jesus. But we're told in the scriptures this evening that the crowd was thick and he was short. So what did he do? He ran ahead of the crowd and he climbed a sycamore tree just to get a glimpse of Jesus as Jesus passed by. And then this wonderful thing happens. Jesus reaches the spot and he looks up and he says, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because I mean to stay with you." And Zacchaeus scampers down the tree, and the scriptures tell us that he receives the Lord with great joy. Now, can you see that what happened to Zacchaeus in some way is what happens to us when we consciously hope? What do I mean? Well, we want to see. And we all find ourselves in a kind of darkness. And we're so hungry just to be able to see the light. So we turn the eyes of our mind and our heart toward a light. But that light hasn't yet emerged. That's what hope is all about. It's a light yet to be born. Because we want to be delivered from what? From this present darkness. This darkness of the unknown. This burden that seems so overwhelming. This problem that doesn't seem to have a solution. And so the task of every soul is to move through the darkness toward the light. Now, what I'm going to say is definitely paradoxical. I mean, it's kind of a contradiction that we move, but the way we move is by waiting. That's what hope is. It is waiting with absolute trust for what is to come. And that's precisely what we must do. You see, what makes us move toward wanting to see the light, the desire in us to come out of this darkness, that's a movement, makes us move ahead like Zacchaeus. We kind of run ahead because we have to climb the tree in order to see. Because only if we climb in order to see will the Lord come to us. So Zacchaeus tells us something more. And this is so important to grasp this. You see, the light that we need to deliver us out of this darkness, which depends on our hope, always has to come from another person. Whether we're a prisoner in our own sin or our own problems or our own sufferings, waiting for freedom, waiting for deliverance, whether we're someone in the hospital carrying and bearing cancer, waiting for a cure, whether we're a woman expecting a child, whether we're a young man or a young woman waiting for love, whether we're a person who for months or even years has been waiting for a job, the light that we need to bring us out of this darkness, which is causing us to despair, cannot come from us totally alone. We have to put our hope in another person, because we realize that only when we do so can that other person reach us. In fact, that's the only real way of, I think, of defining hope. Hope is putting ourselves within reach of another. That's why the 12-step program, whether it's AA or Gamblers Anonymous, that's why it's so successful. Because this person who's in prison, who's addicted, comes to the realization that they're going to die. They're at a point in their lives where they're in total despair and they want to come out of this darkness. And the first thing they have to admit is that they have this terrible addiction. But the second thing, in order to move, is they have to put their hope in a power that's greater than themselves. It cannot come from them alone. It depends on those other people who have taken the journey and recovered, but ultimately the greatest power of all, which they must put their trust in, is in God. That's their higher power. That's what's beyond them. That's where they're going to see the light. You know, in the National Shrine, that gorgeous shrine in Washington, D.C., where they have the image and the icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, underneath the altar where the icon hangs are written the words, Mary, our hope, our life, and our refuge. Now these are powerful words. I love these words. In such a simple way, such a profound truth, such a powerful proclamation. Because Mary, our mother, if there's anyone who is within our reach, it's her. If we choose to place ourselves in her care, especially at any time when we feel ourselves drained, she can give us life. When we feel ourselves so alone, as if we've been abandoned, like refugees, she is our refuge. When we are in such despair or sadness, she becomes our hope. In other words, she is within our reach. Jesus gave his mother to us at the cross precisely for that reason. Not that we could just have an image of her, not that she would simply be some woman that we would remember in the gospel story. He gave her specifically to us as a mother. He said, "Behold your mother." And then he said to her, "Behold your children." So Mary becomes someone who's within our reach. She's so human. There's no one closer to God and yet more human than Mary. And so she understands everything. And so she's within our grasp. You know, I think about that old saying about the telephone that used to say, reach out and touch someone. And Mary is our someone whom we can touch. When as sinners we, with hope, show enough interest to turn ourselves and place ourselves within Mary's reach, then wonderful things can happen. And I mean this sincerely. This is what I mean. So when I say turn, it means that we physically, like I'm doing right now, we turn and we place ourselves in front of her gaze. That's so important. Because the power of that picture lies in the fact that she sees us. She's looking at us. And so that when we turn to her and we simply gaze at her, it's her gaze that tells us she sees us, like Jesus saw Zacchaeus in the tree. And she sees not just us physically, but she sees the heart that's wounded and lost and hungering to be found. And we don't have to crawl back to Mary in order for that to happen. We don't have to whip ourselves in remorse. We don't have to say any magic prayers as if we're offering a sacrifice just to get Mary to look at us. She's looking at us whether we're looking at her at all. You know, in the story of the prodigal son, the son turns. His moment of turning is when he finally says, you know, I need to go home. I need to tell my father, I have sinned against you and against God. I no longer deserve to be called your son. At that moment, the son came to himself. And so he literally turned himself around. That's conversion. And he headed back in the direction of his father. And yet he's not even halfway there up the hill, and his father sees him and runs to him. Well, you and I, we have to overcome these obstacles that stop us from turning to Mary. Because Mary and Jesus, more than anything, want to rush to us. They run to us even before we speak. And they say to us, I love to imagine this, they say to us like the lover in the Song of Songs, stand up, my beloved, my beautiful one, and come. For look, the winter is past, the terrible season is over, the rains are done, your pain is no longer your own. Stand up, my beloved, my beautiful one, and come to me. Let me see you. And then speak to me. Let me hear your voice. Because your voice is sweet and you are lovely.